questions on the film. I've had a chance to sit down and watch it, and I loved it, so congratulations.
Whoa, yeah, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it, man. It's a long journey, 1,000 days of work, so it's like interesting what people think.
Definitely. So where did the idea first start for you? This is such a strong idea for a film. Where did that original idea come when you sat down to work on the script?
It came from me actually, like, starting a family, right? Like, my first attempts to actually have a child, the discussion with my wife, who helped produce this, just about that concept, and then sort of my imagination just sort of ran with it from there. I have my past work deals with kind of the power dynamics, some of my plays about the way people treat each other and kind of inequality, and so it sort of just, and my sci-fi kind of bent, and it just sort of took off.
Couples trying to conceive, it's such, unless you've been through it yourself, you don't know what it's like and what lengths people are willing to go to. We're seeing scenes here in Australia at the moment where a lot of Australian couples that couldn't conceive have got surrogate mothers in the Ukraine. So we're seeing a bunch of Australians jumping on planes and going into a war zone to try and protect the surrogate mother that's carrying their child. Was that something that you really looked at when you were first fleshing out this script, how far couples will go that are having trouble conceiving?
Yeah, of course. That was kind of the point. I've had some friends and, even family who did have issues, and, I have friends right now who are still working on it. It's a sensitive topic, and, as a man, to deal with it and discuss it, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't being heavy-handed with it. I'm an entertainment writer. This is not a documentary on the topic, but at the same time, I ran the script through my wife. I did some research with friends of mine. I had multiple friends of mine who were, female, writers, staffed on shows and playwrights, and just, kind of well-wishers run through it. And even a friend of mine who, sort of was going through this issue, just to make sure, in my attempts to, entertain, I didn't, offend anybody or go over the line or, really take what's, a very personal issue and kind of twist it in the wrong way.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I felt this was a very real, it may be kind of a taboo. So I think it was worth exploring it. It was worth, sort of discussing it. I mean, here in America, we have one of the highest female death rates during childbirth in the Western world. It's like 17 per 100,000 or something like that. It's a little crazy. So I thought, the more kind of eyes on the topic, and, not that I'm really, like I said, it's not a documentary. I'm not trying to, grind an axe or anything, but it was, the topic did seem like there was a lot more to it and a lot of depth there, and I just felt like it really did work well. And there's all kinds of other, like, medical issues and people in power, like doctors specifically, and that kind of elevation between a doctor and a patient. And my dad was a physician, my sister's a physician, I have a lot of physicians in my family, but I just felt that was kind of a dynamic that was ripe for sorry, excuse me. That's
speaking
right. Of the devil. It's just, one sec, sorry. It was worth exploring, and it just kind of felt personal to me.
Yeah, I think one of the elements that really raises this film and makes it different to other films in this genre also is that you have some science and politics in there as well. When did you decide to bring those elements into it?
It's funny. I don't really decide to bring elements in, or it's not. I'm more a farmer than an architect. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I don't necessarily have like kind of a clear vision of like any political or point I'm trying to make necessarily. But my background as a playwright, and I do, my plays definitely have more of a social justice kind of a bent to them. So I think it just maybe is sort of innate in part of my, you know, my intention, where, you know, just the dynamic between two people or an organization, and, you know, I always kind of root for the underdog. My sympathies are always with, you know, the basically the common people, the, you know, just everyday people, instead of these kind of authorities, and, you know, power structures that have been built up to sort of appease and control the masses. So I don't know if that kind of came through. I didn't mean to be heavy-handed with it. I kind of am second guessing myself now that you say it's is it a little too on the nose? I don't.
No,
I wasn't
no,
planning on it being message oriented or anything.
Yeah. Now, one of the things I think that's so perfect in this film was the casting for the roles of Danny and Marie. How did you go about that casting process? Because I know that Victoria kind of came on board quite late as Marie.
Yeah, it was. So Victoria was associated with the project probably from day one, but she wasn't really. I hadn't seen her as Marie, you know. I kind of felt her role to be, you know, she's got kind of a more, you know, I didn't really appreciate her acting chops at the time, so we kind of worked together, and, you know, as she kind of opened up about some personal items in her life that, you know, I kind of, it's really not my place to discuss, and so I felt that she could really, you know, attempt the role. And so we did some readings, and, you know, she was game. You know, as you can tell, you know, the role has a lot of, you know, dramatic moments. It has a lot of, you know, kind of spicy scenes. So, you know, her passion for it, her you know, kind of go-getter nature won me over.
Yeah, and tell us a little bit as well about Ignacio playing Danny as well, because he comes across so brilliantly in this film.
Yeah, he wasn't my first choice. We were planning on using kind of a friend of ours who's, I guess, you know, he's a big Broadway guy. You know, met him through my wife, and we built the whole project around it for him. And he's got a very, you know, charismatic, common kind of, you know, everyday, handsome kind of a leading man feel. But because of scheduling conflicts and, you know, COVID and our project, you know, like budgetary issues, that sort of fell apart. So we were looking around, and we had a bunch of readers, you know, people from the Broadway world, people that I'd cast in plays of mine. And then, you know, it was basically Victoria who brought him in, and he did some reading. He really seemed like he was really passionate for the part. He really wanted it. And we put him through some readings with some people, and it kind of came down to him and the guy who plays Steve, Jared, who played a lead in one of my other parts. But, you know, the Steve character needed some comedic sensibility. And Jared, you know, if you recall the Steve character, you know, he had more of that kind of lighthearted, sort of a comedic nature. So I felt that, you know, and Ignacio kind of had the standard, you know, protagonist, you know, basically his platform, right? And so we went with Ignacio for the lead, and then Jared did Steve, and it just felt right, you know, especially because Ignacio and Victoria knew each other previously. Their chemistry was, they were more comfortable with each other, you know, and especially with, you know, they're playing husband and wife with all that comes along with that. It really allowed them to be much more comfortable during some of the, you know, more racier scenes, especially.
Definitely. And I know also that because of COVID, your shoot was very different to the way it would normally be. You all stayed in a camp kind of together to keep you away from the outside world. Did that change the way that the shoot felt, and did it actually make everybody feel like they were a lot closer?
You know, I think so. We, you know, because of COVID, we built our bubble in a summer camp, so everybody got to kind of live together, cast, crew, everybody. All the meals were, you know, together. They kind of hung out, the campfires every night, dinner, and we tried to make it, you know, a very homey feel. Just, you know, kind of going the extra mile on making the food quality, 3 meals a day. You know, it wasn't like a film shoot where you get, you know, kind of, you get some breakfast and then you get a weird pizza dinner. You know, we 3 like nearly gourmet meals. We were very blessed to get our cook, and, you know, we wanted it to feel like a you know, a getaway, almost like a college, you know, experience. There was a game room with billiards and basketball court, and hiking and kayaking. So on the days off and when people were unwinding after the 10, 12-hour shoots, people had more time to get to know each other, and I think that made them comfortable for some of the other scenes as well. Although we did have a intimacy coordinator come in to kind of massage some of those elements.
Now I have to ask, what does an intimacy coordinator do? I've never heard of that role before. What do they do?
Well, they basically are an intermediary between the director and the cast when intimate scenes are going to take place.
Okay.
I thought it would be important because there are some intimate scenes in this, and I wanted everybody to be comfortable. I didn't necessarily want people to feel like embarrassed coming to me or saying they were uncomfortable with something, or I didn't want to have that dynamic. Especially, this is my first feature,
Yep.
and I have not really directed much intimate scenes. I think I had one chaste kiss in one of my plays, and that's actually in a couple of my plays, and that's pretty much the only intimacy I had really worked with. So on this level, I thought, let's get somebody that deals with this every day to make it comfortable, and frankly, make me comfortable too. I don't want to be one of these guys who's pushing for a shot or to try to make somebody do something they don't want to do. I had written out the scenarios as I envisioned them, right?
Yeah.
And the only reason I even had those scenes is because they justified the story. They were part of the process of the storyline, and so they were necessary to the story. But I wanted them to be something that people were comfortable with, and frankly, that they felt vested in. So by having the intimacy coordinator there, she discussed things individually with all the cast, and then if there were any issues with it, which there did not really seem to be, she could anonymize it and bring it to me. So it wasn't like anybody was, not a team player, or there were just no worries about their own fears, discussing things with the director. I think people have a tendency to fear not being, not doing what they're asked, or thinking they're uncomfortable, especially with these kind of scenes. So
Definitely.
that was the wonderful part. She worked out some of the scenarios. I gave her some kind of rough guidelines of what the story called for, and she worked with the cast to kind of determine actions, activities, and more specific elements. And then we all discussed it together. So it was a very kind of like communal environment to really get everybody on the same page, and make sure that there was no surprises when we actually had the crew there to start rolling.
Definitely. Hamza, as you mentioned, this is your first feature as well. What's the biggest difference that you noticed going from theatre to film? Ironically, my co-host and I were discussing this last night at a theatre show, the difference between theatre and film. What did you notice as a director was the biggest difference between theatre and film?
I mean, there are quite different animals. I would say theater is actually more similar to TV in many ways, especially as a writer. That's kind of the mentality I have. That's the vibe I get, just kind of sitting at the blank page.
Yep.
As far as like directing, it's also quite different. So when I do a play, I write the draft, and then we do the readings. And I have a couple of drafts. We do the readings, and then we shape it together, and then we go through the process and we break it out scene by scene, and we really work out the entire process. It could be a month, 2 months, easy, at least, before, I think the minimum I want to do is 6 weeks to really get a play together. But we can be up to 3 months in rehearsal, working the nuances, playing with it, getting to know the cast. And then the run itself, it's kind of like, as a director or as a writer, a playwright, you're done. I usually kind of keep an eye on it, come back, watch the shows because I love it, but you're done. You've worked out the process, you've got the rehearsal, you've staged it out, and then it's up to the stage manager and the cast and how they interpret it every night. With the film, it's vastly different. Usually you do not get that kind of rehearsal time. We had the readings just for chemistry readings, and then, they probably had 2 weeks. Some of them had less time than others. Obviously, the leads had a lot of dialogue to memorize, and so they have to do a lot of that process themselves. There's not as much like interaction with it. But one of the benefits of this COVID shoot was they were actually all living together, so they could rehearse offline. They didn't need me to be taking up, valuable time with the crew there, breaking things down. They were able to do readings themselves. They were able to interact with it, get off book and all that. And so by the time they got to set, they were a little more refined than they usually are on TV and film shoots, where you just really don't have the time to work with the director quite as long.
Definitely. Well, Hamza, thank you so much for giving that insight. That is an absolutely amazing insight from someone that's experienced both theatre and film. I guess I know we are running out of time, so to finish up, what would you like to say to our listeners out there who are about to sit down and watch The Institute for the first time?
I mean, just, keep an open mind. It's supposed to be a trip, like just let yourself kind of experience it, and please do reach out and let me know your thoughts. I make these movies in sort of a bubble, where it's just my ideas, and of course I have some trusted compatriots that I can kind of bounce these ideas off of, but actually it's for other people to enjoy. I couldn't do it without people enjoying it and appreciating it and viewing it. And so please do reach out and let me know your thoughts, and I hope you find it something unique that you haven't seen before.
Definitely. Well, Hamza, thank you so much